One.
All right. Hi, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day, happy Tuesday, and welcome to session 3 of project management training. And I see Kat's very frustrated, so hopefully, hopefully there's no other audio issues with the group. But so we have a lot to cover today. I'm going to take the first half of the session, and Jackie D'Agostino will take the second half. And so I will let Jackie introduce herself when it's her time for the session. But I'm Sue Matzat, Senior Vice President of Operations. I've been with LaBella for probably longer than some of you have been alive. No joke. And by trade, I'm a structural engineer, been a project manager for a long time, and trying to use that knowledge to help with company operations now. So we could probably skip right over to the third slide, Heather. So today we're going to talk about the initiation and planning of a project. And in my opinion, this is the most important part of project management, getting things started off the right way. If you don't start off the right way, then it's a lot of catching up to do as you move along. So we'll cover a little bit on contract execution, and then everybody's favorite, scope, schedule, fee, project kickoff, and then stakeholder engagement. And then Jackie will cover fee structure, the PIF, and invoices and batch billing. So Heather, we could go to the next slide. So again, as Mike Windrell had let you know in session 1, this is kind of more about the LaBella way of going through the steps of a project versus, some of the more philosophical things. So the steps that we follow when setting up a project at LaBella are making sure you secure a signed contract, making sure you have sub-consultant and subcontractor agreements in place, understanding the project scope and staffing that will be needed to fulfill the scope, developing a schedule, the fee breakdown, ensuring that the people that you think are going to work on the project or that were in the proposal are actually available to work on the project, and then aligning the fee breakdown and the budget with that staffing and your schedule milestones. Once you've figured that all out, then you can complete and submit the PIF, which is the project initiation form. And then another very important step that I know tends to get skipped over is holding a kickoff meeting with the team to inform them of everything that you know or have learned through the proposal process and the project setup process to get everybody started off on the right foot. So we can go to starting to talk about contracts. And as you may or may not know, Bob Attardo and the legal team have some lunch and learns that they have started on very specific points on contracts. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but just some of the kind of key points for project managers to pay attention to. And because we only have an hour for this part. So you won the proposal. Now you have to execute a contract. And there are many different types of contracts, and I'm sure you've probably all been exposed to some of these. But there's our LaBella professional services agreement that you may or may not have submitted with the proposal, as Chris Lapel mentioned last week. There's a client issued agreement. Some of the architectural projects use the AIA standard agreement. And then I know there was a question from Catherine Thompson last week about the term agreement or master services agreements that sometimes are issued by clients. And also a purchase order can be considered a contract. The signed proposal And then obviously sometimes we're not the prime, but we're also, we also act as a sub-consultant. So we may be signing a sub-consultant agreement ourselves. The question that Catherine had last time was, if you have an existing term agreement or master services agreement, do you also need the LaBella professional services agreement? There is no need for that, but in those term agreements, then typically a client will issue you either a task order or a purchase order, or they may have another name for it, but an assignment that is specific under that master services agreement. And we could spend a whole day on, all the nuances of that, but just know that that term master services agreement is the agreement. And then what you need is just a document that says, here's the scope of work, this is the schedule, and this is the fee for that particular assignment. All of the terms and conditions that are part of that agreement will already have been signed off on. So terms and conditions. So I know we have a group here that, some have a number of years of experience managing projects and handling contracts, and some that may not have. So I just wanted to point out a few things that I want you to pay attention to when you're presented with either a client contract or a term agreement, any kind of contract. So terms and conditions are going to set forth all of the legal conditions tied to that agreement. It may also include, things like cybersecurity, sustainability, minority, woman-owned, veteran-owned business requirement goals, percentage goals for that contract, and employment practices like various EEO or apprenticeship terms and conditions. And I mentioned the cybersecurity because that is a relatively new thing in contracts. And, for some of our clients like Avangrid or some of the national grid, the utility companies, they're very specific on what data you can handle and how you handle that data, because they have critical infrastructure that they don't want to be exposed to forces that shouldn't see that. And as if I was the attorney in the room, Bob would want me to point out to pay special attention to indemnification and liability. So indemnity is, what are we saying we're going to be on the hook for? So some statements, if you read the indemnity clauses in various contracts, will say that LaBella is, no matter what the issue is and who created the issue, LaBella must, be on the hook for paying all the client's legal fees, or etc. So we want to make sure that that statement says, to the extent caused by our negligent acts or omissions, and that's a key statement. In the intranet on the legal page, the legal team has a bunch of cheat sheets that kind of walk through some of the language you might see in a contract and how we would hope to be able to mark that up and send that back to get it approved. Now, you've probably already been in this situation where the client is like, if you don't sign our contract as is, then we can't work with you. In those cases, I would definitely get our legal team's opinion on, depending on what type of work we're doing, whether we're, what kind of risk we're assuming, whether or not it's okay to still sign the agreement as is or not. We have in some cases said, well, it's not the language we really want, but we know this particular client and we want to do work for them. Therefore, we're going to go ahead and sign that contract. But I would recommend that you get someone else in addition to yourself to help review that and know that we are accepting that risk or not. The other is liability. So again, on the legal page, in the cheat sheets and in our standard agreement, LaBella Professional Services Agreement, we kind of break down liability at that $50,000 fee mark. So if it's a smaller project below the 50,000, then you can read the text that's here. If it's greater than 50,000, then it's we go up to the limits of our insurance coverage. I do want to point out that, again, and I think I have a slide here.
Sue, you froze. Cat. Do you want to take over till we get Sue back?
Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Okay. All right. So let me see. Where were we here? So I'm just going to go. Sue was talking about certain things. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the other items on the slide. One of them is the topic that we covered last week very briefly, which is when we do have a professional services agreement, it needs to be signed by an officer of the company. And I put that link in the chat room last week. However, the signatory by us does not happen until after the client signs. That way we're making sure that we're not getting on the hook for anything that any modifications that the client wants to make. Sue, are you back?
I am.
Okay.
So, kind of a cruel joke that there's no internet connection in my office right now.
Oh,
Anyway, so where were we? Okay. I'm going to try to see this on my phone. That's the other thing about being a project manager. You need to be nimble, right? Okay. So with the LaBella issued professional services agreement. Okay, now I'm. Okay.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
It's always got to happen to somebody, right? Why not me? Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. But I know I'm not alone in this situation. So, okay. So the LaBella issued professional services agreement, as we mentioned last week, would be signed by the officer or signatory of the company after the client signs. There are client issued contracts that we are expected to sign before the client signs, and that's okay. But we do just need to make sure that you, as the PM, understand what's in that contract. And again, if there's anything that we aren't sure of, that we get some interpretation by legal or another senior member of your team. And I think, I'm not sure if Chris covered this, but the proposal itself can be signed by you as the project manager. It's just that services agreement that needs to be signed by the officer or signatory authority. And that list is on the legal page of the intranet. So, and you if you're prime and you have a team of subconsultants or subcontractors, are then going to be required to issue subconsultant or subcontractor agreements to the subs. You may ask them to submit a quote or a proposal that has, and they may attach their terms and conditions or their agreement to that, in addition to ours. So it's key to note to them, or to have the discussion with them at least, of you know, we will be issuing you an agreement that has terms and conditions. We want you to sign off on those, or are we going to accept their terms and conditions and make sure that they are mostly in agreement. You know, we've run into situations, and you probably have too, where we need a specialty sub, and they may be a small firm, and they only have an insurance umbrella of, you know, $2 million. And the client says we have to have $5 million. We can accept that, again, depending on the service that they're providing, risk management, etc. So it can get a little muddy, but I think the key I want to point out is just make sure to look at those things and talk with the sub about what each of us are signing off on. Okay, here's the page where the legal page where we're talking about their resources. So I don't know if you've ever gone on here or not yet, but I find it helpful to kind of read through these different cheat sheets. And then we have our standard agreements, and then our certificates of insurance. And you can see there is the certificate of the cyber liability insurance, as well as our general liability, which is going to include, you know, all of our auto, workers' comp, you know, etc. We do have separate professional liability. So in those terms and conditions, you'll want to pay attention to what are the limits that the client is asking us to sign off on, and whether or not we have that amount of insurance available. Okay, was there a comment? Okay. Dustin's all good. All agreements and contracts, including POs, task orders, etc., signed proposals, please save an executed copy. And executed means we've signed off on it and the client or the subconsultant have signed off on it, in the project folder under the project management agreements and amendments. There are a lot of times that, you know, issues come up and we have to look back to see what that agreement says. And if it's not there, that's an issue. I remember a project that it was an architectural project, which they probably won't like me for saying that, but where we had actually spent over $300,000 in fee and had delivered the schematic design documents to the client before we received a signed or an executed contract from them. Anybody know why that might not be a good thing? You want to put it in the chat?
Okay, somebody's got it now. Take a guess.
All right, they're being shy, Kat.
If we didn't have a contract, we wouldn't get paid.
There you go, Mike. Excellent answer. Right, how can we ask for money after the fact? It's very, very difficult. So And maybe I'll take a break. Do we need to reach out to the insurance email, and when can we use the standard insurance? I'm not sure. So many contracts require a certificate of insurance that may have the client named as an additional insured. So the standard certificates that are on our intranet can be used if we don't have a client that says we need ourselves to be added as an additional insured. In those cases, yes, reach out, send that request to the insurance email, and then they will work with our insurance company to get that certificate that's specific to that client or that project. Does that help?
Yes, that answers the question.
Okay. All right. So, and Jackie will cover this more, but also if you can, with your PIF, using the PIF email address, if you can add a copy of that agreement or that PO, etc., then the people doing the project folder setup will put a copy of that into the project folder for you. And I know we've had some experiences where that hasn't happened, but that is the direction that they've been given. So just want to note that. So contract amendments and supplements, they happen all the time. So we don't necessarily have a standard form for a contract amendment or supplement for a client to sign off on. I know we have various templates, but we don't have kind of just a uniform standard. Use this all the time. Plus a client may have one that they want you to sign or use. But just before going through that process, talk with your client about how would you like me to have this recorded? How would you like me to send you this information for it to be reviewed and signed off on? And again,
Sue?
yeah,
Just
I know we
open up.
have the one, right?
Okay. That's
So Kat, if you want to mention that.
Yeah, we do have a short form document, which is on the intranet under, if you go to operations and forms, it is there. It's called a contract modification short form, and it's also accessible via the quality GPS page with all the forms.
Thank you. Thank you. And also, if you have an amendment, a supplement, whatever your client calls it, make sure to coordinate with your biller to update the Deltec budget. And again, Jackie will review more of this in her session. And make sure to coordinate with the subs and update their agreements also. So additional work might include additional work from the subconsultants or subcontractors. And a lot of times we're so concerned about making sure our own agreement gets updated, we forget that we need to update their agreements too, and their budgets. So I just want to make sure to point that out. And one situation that came up recently that I think is important, we're all working with a number of different clients and providing different services. And sometimes we work with the same clients. Like, for instance, the city of Rochester, there might be a environmental contract or a transportation project contract, and that client is using the same base contract. And we may not know that, well, when they signed that for the transportation project, they crossed this wording out, or they changed this wording, and the client accepted that. And then the environmental team tries to change it to something different, or doesn't change it, and now we've got kind of, as a company, we've got two different contracts, contract terms and conditions with the same client. So I would encourage everybody to reach out and, like, if you know that somebody else is working with a certain client, just say, you know, how have you been handling this as a project manager? You know, what did they say when you, you know, tried to make these changes on their contract? Can we, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So communication, right? Okay, so I'm not, there's tons more we could talk about contracts, but again, we don't have that much time. But I, again, would encourage you to reach out to legal, to some, you know, senior managers. And if you have questions, we've got a lot of good resources internally that can help you answer some of those questions. And never hesitate to reach out to the client. They probably don't even understand all of what's in their agreements and contracts. So I know a lot of times we teach them things too. So, so now that you have the contract, hopefully the contract has the scope well laid out. You have some kind of idea of at least a high level schedule, and you know what the fee is going to be. So how do you take that and make that into something that is going to help your staff or your team produce the project? So let's start with scope. So from the proposal and from the contract, hopefully you know what disciplines are involved. Hopefully you know what subconsultants, what specialty people you need on the team. If not, please go back and read the proposal and the contract and make sure that you've got everyone included. And then the staffing levels and expertise. So I want the A team only on my project. And, you know, it's okay that A team, you know, I'm going to bill them out at $300 an hour. Well, maybe your fee can't support that. So take a good look at the scope, see what you can get done, where you need the experts, where you need production, and develop that balance. You know, there's a question about billing rates, and I'm going to let Jackie talk most about that. But for right now, we're going to say, talk to your biller, talk to the finance department about our 2023 rates. They are working on them. There are some, you know, different by region, by division. There are some standard rates, and I'll let Jackie talk more about that. Outside consultants, think about when you really need to bring them in and when you don't. Request that you had them on the team. And I'm going to probably lose you guys again. It says my internet is unstable. Can you see me? Hear me? Okay. Again, you may have signed on for some women-owned or minority-owned business requirements. Make sure to pay attention to
We lost her again.
Jump in, Kat.
Well, I guess what I'm going to say is I'm curious to know, while we wait for Sue to come back, has anybody done this before on a project or seen one of these on a project that they've been involved with.
Yes.
Yes, Mike. So was this something that you prepared after getting the job, before getting the job? Was it given to you as a team member?
No, I use it to prepare proposals. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It's similar to this. It's got one cover sheet. It's got up to 6, or you can add as many tasks as you want. And I've got standard rates in there. I got lab rates. I got all that
Yep.
stuff. So you figure out what the level of effort is, you populate it, and boom, you got your budget right there. You put it on a proposal. I can have it out to the client in no time at all. So plus it's good to give to accounting. If backup is needed for the
Thank you,
PIF,
right.
I know that some people don't properly fill out a PIF. You know, one of my pet peeves, put in the person. I mean, obviously I know on larger projects, you don't know who's going to be tapping or hitting the project, but you know, you should know who's going to work on the project. You should know their hourly rates, you know, so you can back into it to make sure you're charging an appropriate amount of money. So we make money as a company. And you're not getting crushed on your profitability. So yeah, I have one of these and it works well, and I've been using it for many moons.
Yeah, so thank you, Mike. That's perfect. So, you know, Sue was talking about this today in sort of a like after the fact, and I think that depending on what division you're in, it either you are preparing this type of thing, like Mike said, in advance for your proposal, so you know exactly the level of effort that you're going to be expending, so you're making sure that you're hitting your profit margins, right? For some other divisions where the fee is based on the percentage of the project, the construction costs, such as like in the architecture group, right? You may actually be bidding on the project in advance, putting in a cost number, and then you're backing in the staff in the back end. So there's kind of different ways to do it. Probably, I don't know, maybe Jackie could tell us like what percent of the company does it like before or after, or when, how often she sees them. But yeah, ideally, doing something like this in advance when you're putting the proposal together makes life a little bit less stressful, because you know going in that you're going to hit your profit margins. The other thing that is really helpful is when you create this, it then becomes part of your kickoff package, so that it gets handed out to the staff that are on the project, so they see exactly how many hours they have to charge against the project, so that there isn't any confusion. And if somebody's given a task and it's clear on here that it's a 2-hour task, if they get an hour into it and they know that there's, you know, another day's worth of work, they've got a clue, you know, call the PM right away and let them know what's going on. Because that's happened to me. I thought, you know,
Yeah.
I thought we were
And
good, but
that feedback is helpful, because if we don't know, you know, if I'm not an expert on a specific task and they blast through it and I lose my shirt on profitability, it's nice to, you know, get feedback, say, hey, next time you put the proposal together, give me
Yep.
15 hours instead of 3, you know?
Right.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm back. I don't know if you guys
Yay.
can hear me or see me,
Yep.
but I am so sorry. Maybe I should have worked from home today. So we can go down to thank you, Kat and Mike. Very important things to point out. So we'll skip down to schedule and fee. So based on how you've kind of laid out your scope, your man-hour breakdown, your resource planning, and Heather, I don't know if you're able to scroll that down for me. If you haven't, for the proposal, you'll want to put together a project schedule. And sometimes we will have a schedule that is for the external team, like the client, and then we'll have a more expanded schedule for the internal team that lays out more milestones or interim milestones, like we need a QA QC set 2 weeks before the actual deliverable date to the client, so that we have time to review the drawings or the report, etc. So I'd encourage you to think that way. We don't require PMs to, you have to do a Gantt chart or you have to do a bar chart. You can do whatever makes sense to you and makes sense to your team. Sometimes the client dictates that also. But we do want you to have a schedule that also lays out for the team important information, important dates. And again, for your information to know, when are specific disciplines or specific sub-consultants to be involved, and when can they kind of stop, pencils down, let us go to this next step and then come back later. We can go to the next slide. So project fee, again, maybe in the proposal you were required to put a man-hour breakdown, but you didn't have to assign rates yet. Maybe you didn't have to break it down into as many phases as what the actual production of the project required. So you may or may not have already done your fee breakdown, but if not, this is the time to do it. And again, just still be thinking about those disciplines. What are the deliverables? How much am I going to spend for any given phase? Or is, am I required to bill, on an accrual basis, or, a percentage of lump sum, et cetera. And just be thinking about how that production of work is going to be tied to the fee and to the billing. Jackie will go over a lot more about that. So we can skip down to the next slide. So as Kat mentioned, the project kickoff, again, I'm, if I ask everybody in the chat to say, have you ever kicked off a project yourself as project manager, or been involved in a project where there was no kickoff? I'm gonna guess that everybody would say, yes, I've been in that situation. And if you say no, I'd be curious to understand how that happened. But why do you need to kick it off? Well, you've been potentially involved in the proposal. You've been involved in the contract, getting the contract set up. You've been involved in getting that scope, schedule, fee involved, but nobody else has yet. So you need to set the expectations for the team, to just say, hey, go ahead. We got 2 months to do schematic design or get this report together, send them off on their merry way. That's not really project management. So you need to share what you know and what you've learned with the team. And we have on our operations quality GPS project management page, we have a kickoff template that you are free to use. You probably already have something that you've used, or sometimes there are client specific agendas. Again, we're not dictating what to use. We're offering you some tools, but we do want you to make sure that you do have a kickoff meeting. You have an agenda, you have some minutes, and that you save that in the project folder. Again, on small projects, it can be, well, I talked to, the only other person that's going to work on that project, and this is what we agreed to. So you can scale it up and down as needed. We also will use that for looking back when we do project closeout, and just kind of seeing where the project started off, where we ended up, and then hopefully on some lessons learned that we'll cover in our last session. And Heather, we can go to the next slide. So kicking it off, what do we want to make sure that we cover in that kickoff meeting? In that agenda, we want to make sure that all the key client or agency contacts are listed. You want to make sure that your team members are actually contacting the people at the client office that are actually able to make decisions on the project, that are actually involved. Same with the agencies. If it's DEC, you don't want them calling Region 9 if it's Region 8. Other LaBella staff involved, and what their role is. So, if you have drawings that have to be produced, we'd like to have somebody that's in charge of kind of that production side of things, like, are you using Revit? Are you using Civil 3D, etc. The overall objectives and any client history, like, you may not want to put this in writing, but like, watch out for this particular thing with this client, or this client's great, so we really need to do a great job, which we do for all projects, but and then a little bit more about the project scope, and obviously the things that you've put together for the budget, the fee breakdown, schedule. And I would be remiss to not note, you need to make sure that to manage your risk, if there are any safety hazards or other job hazards that are likely to be encountered in that project, or making sure everybody knows that in order to go on that project site, you have to have a hard hat on, steel toe boots, safety glasses, or something else, or you're not allowed to go on that site without a badge from the client. You need to get that badge first, etc. And we can go to the next one. So that's kind of more for the internal team, but you should also kick off the project with the external team. So sub-consultants, the client. Again, you're just trying to set those expectations so that everybody's on the same page before you start to launch into spending time on the project. We can go to the next slide. So, we talk a lot about the client, and there are different people involved sometimes with the client, but there are also outside stakeholders, like the regulatory agencies or funding agencies. They make sure you know what is required to satisfy, say, DASNY is providing $1 million to the project. Is there paperwork? Is there a paper trail that needs to be done to satisfy that funding requirement? Or regulatory agencies, I've been involved in a number of projects where they can make or break your timeline, right? If you don't start off right at the beginning talking with, SHPO, for instance, they can, no matter what project schedule you think you're going to be under, they have a different idea of, what that schedule is going to be. And we can go to the next slide. So it's your job as PM to manage those stakeholders. So identify with your client project manager, how much are they doing versus how much you're expected to do. Hopefully you've kind of already talked about this during the contract phase, but if not, now's a great time to do it. Make sure that you and your team know the agencies and the codes that govern the client. Gee, I didn't know I needed a permit for that. Darn. I should have added 6 months to my schedule. And that by doing that, by getting them engaged early and frequently, then you can work together, and then you can, build that trust, and hopefully along the way, you won't have some of those gotchas. They can help inform your design, especially if you have, public involved. Understand how much the public is going to be involved or not involved, and communicate. Next slide. Okay, so this is where Jackie's going to take over. So I think now would be a good time to take a break, but if there are any questions first that I can answer.
Sue, there was one question in the chat
Okay.
regarding handling unforeseen rental equipment.
So maybe whoever asked that, can you kind of elaborate on the situation?
Basically, due to field conditions, the equipment we were using is not capable of doing the locating it very well, so we need to bring in some bigger equipment.
So how would you handle that?
Yeah, it's we didn't originally budget for it, but I mean,
Mhm.
trying to minimize impact to the project.
I would say that's a change order. You probably go right back to the client, explain what's going on and negotiate some extra money for it. That's what I would do. My 2 cents, sorry.
No, that's the perfect answer. Yeah,
Okay.
I wouldn't say like, oh darn, I don't want to talk to the client. I made a mistake. I should just make it right. And I'm just gonna assume that cost and not, not tell them that I'm making this change. I would certainly say, and just be, the best thing you can do with a client is, as Mike, I think, alluded to, is just be honest with them and say, I'm sorry, we thought this piece of machinery was gonna do the job, but it can't. So, and then talk through what the situation, they may say like, well, how about if we split it? Or yeah, we should, if you do this for us, we'll do that for you. Or, as Mike said, hopefully they'll be willing to say, yep, we accept that change and just send us your bill for it.
And sometimes in the proposal, I'll put in a 10-15% contingency fee, just a general, it's like an oops, oh shit fund, one of those things. And pardon my language, but you'll have that extra money, God forbid something goes wrong. You may have, some cash there to bail you out.
And speaking about the proposal, so, the one thing I want to get across to everybody on these meetings is we've all made so many mistakes. I mean, it happens. We're people. So if you had a proposal and the proposal went out and it didn't specify the type of equipment that was going to be used for the project, for the next one, put in there what type of equipment's going to be used for the project so that you have a legal leg to stand on to go back to the client and say, look, we assumed we were going to use this type of GeoPro because of what we understood to be the site conditions and what was conveyed to us. And, we went out there and it is not going to work. So, if you have it in the scope and the understanding in the proposal, what you're going to actually be using, I've used that in the past before, especially for, you don't always have an opportunity to go out and do a site visit for some proposals. You're going based on what the client says and they want the lowest price. So sometimes they may overstate the ease of access in some sort of situations. So
Yeah, and I'm not sure if we covered this very well, which maybe we will take this into account for future sessions. But in the proposals phase and in the contract phase, assumptions and exclusions are something that, if you didn't put it in the proposal, you can still have a conversation with the client about it before you sign the contract.
Yeah.
So, talk to each other and say, is this list of assumptions and exclusions, do we both accept these? And then if we do, great. But it's never too, just because it wasn't in the proposal doesn't mean you don't have the opportunity to still talk about those things. So.
absolutely.
Okay, well, let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll be back to talk all about fee. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I'm Jackie D'Agostino. I'm the billing manager at LaBella. I've been here for almost 9 years. So today we're going to go through the different fees that you can select and the PIF. So for some of you that have been project managers for a while, this might just be review for you. For some of you that are new to project manager roles, this is probably a lot of new stuff. So I'm going to kind of create like a mix of a little bit of both. So if you have anything that's been helpful for you or anything that I don't touch on, please feel free to interject at any point. Or if you have any questions at any point, please feel free to put that in the chat. I do have a couple of poll questions throughout my presentation. The first question that I'd like to ask you is, what fee type are you most familiar with? So I do have them listed here on the PowerPoint. So I have lump sum, based fixed fee, hourly, hourly not to exceed, unit billing, A and B. You're a pro with all fee types, or you're not familiar with any. Okay, a lot of lump sum and phased fixed fees. Okay, and a little bit of mix. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you are experienced project managers. So this will be a lot of reviewing for you. So that's great. If you guys have any questions at all when I'm going through things, or you found things as that are helpful for you that you want to share with other project managers, again, please feel free to interject. So the different fee types that we have available are lump sum, base fixed fee, unit billing, unit table, which I will touch on, hourly, which is not a max, hourly not to exceed, which has a maximum that you cannot exceed on a contract, mixed fee. Mixed fee is not something that I have an example of for various reasons, because mixed fee is by nature very unique and should be discussed with your biller. Mixed fee is also something that that comes with experience as well. So before you use mixed fee, it's something that you should have a conversation with your biller about before using, just so that you know exactly what the plan is, and that way your biller knows what to expect when you're sending in a project as well. So if you are planning on using a mixed fee, it's great to have that conversation before you send in that project. And then know your billing cycle as well. Your billing cycle, most projects will be on the regular billing cycle, which is every 4 weeks. Sometimes they can be a little bit longer, which is 5 weeks, but typically it's every 4 weeks. And then there are a couple of clients that have differing schedules. Avangrid, our favorite client, as always, they are typically due date is on the 20th of the month. And then there are a couple of other clients, municipalities, school districts, they have other due dates as well, just based on their typical billing cycles. So just make sure that you have open communications with your clients, and then make sure that you communicate those due dates with your billers, so that way they can fit you into their schedule as well. That way we have open communication, and that way there's no one that's under the wire and trying to get that stuff done. And everyone's happy. This is the first example, is a lump sum. This is a fixed price for a project. It's an overall percent complete. So you would want to, on your batch billing, indicate the amount that you want to bill or the overall percent. So this is where you would indicate the amount, or you would indicate the percent here. Either way, you would want to make sure that whatever amount that you are billing covers the amount that was spent on the project. If you have billed ahead on the project, overall, you would just want to make sure that you are covering the overall amount that you have billed on the project. Accounting is your second set of eyes for your projects, but you are ultimately responsible for your project's budgets. This is an example of a fixed fee project. This is one where the reimbursable expense is included in the fee. So you have your phases listed, and then a fee listed for each phase, with a percent for each phase, and a fee for each phase. On the batch billing, you would indicate the amount, or again, the percent that would need to be billed for each phase. And again, you would need to be making sure that the amount that is billed covers the WIP that is spent for each phase as well. This is an example of a phased fixed fee where the reimbursable expenses are not included in the fee. They are billed in addition to. So at the bottom here, you can see that there is a billing limit with the expenses billed in addition to the fee. So you have the phases listed, the phase for the fee listed for each phase, and then the expenses listed down below. So the fixed price for each phase, and then the expenses billed in addition to the fee for each phase. Unit billing, typically this is where you would have a number of a quantity of something. Typically you see this with SWIP inspections, but it could be with anything. Site inspections I've seen it with, but typically I've seen it with SWIP inspections. And then this particular project was set up with a limit just so that we could see that we're not exceeding the number of limits that we had, or number of inspections that was capped for this one. But you could label this with whatever the number of, and then we could have the fee listed for whatever it was. But it would be a fixed price for a specific type of unit, and you could set this up with however you wanted to do this. If you wanted to bill a unit billing, again, I would have a conversation with your biller. If you haven't caught on, your biller will be one of your best friends. So I would have open communication if you're looking to do a unit billing for your project. I would have that conversation with your biller so that way they can set up the project for you correctly. You will also, but I would still make sure that if you're setting up the unit billing, that you're still covering the time and expenses that are being charged to the project. So unit tables, we've been using this a lot in the environmental department specifically. Again, unit tables will be fixed price for multiple different types of units. We've been trying to recoup money for owned pieces of equipment that we have. But for something like this, employees would need to promptly submit like weekly reports for units so that way they can be billed to the projects. They would need to be handed into the accounting department so that way we can enter these units promptly onto your projects. For something like this, you would have to talk to your biller ahead of setting up your project so that way we can get the unit table set up ahead of time, get the unit set up ahead of time. It's somewhat of a process to get it set up so that way we have the type of units that you want and the unit quantities that you want and the unit prices. And then we would need to discuss if it covers expenses or if it's in relation to the time instead. So this is, again, a conversation that you need to have with your biller if you're planning on using a unit table at all. Hourly, this is billed based on the number of hours that are charged or accumulated during the billing period. This has no max amount. This is just simply however much is billed during the period or accumulated during the period is just billed out to the client. So it will just state whoever worked on the project, the expenses that have accumulated on the project, the billing rate that that's applicable to the employees that have worked, and the total amount for a total dollar amount. It is important to note that if there is no rate assigned to an employee, Deltec will just default to a 0 rate. So the employee's name will show up, but there will be no rate here. So there will be no amount as well. So it'll just have, in this instance, like Harkey will show up with the total hours here, but there will be no rate and no amount. So then there would be no revenue associated with that employee. So it's very important to note that every employee, if you're using specific rates, have a specific hourly rate associated with them. Again, accounting is your second set of eyes for these things, but ultimately you are responsible because these are your projects. So it's important to double check all of those things. Hourly not to exceed projects. So this is billed based on the number of hours and expenses accumulated during the billing period with a maximum amount that can be billed. It is important to note that if you ever hit that maximum amount that is entered into Deltec for this particular project, for example, there is a 13,107 maximum amount entered. Deltec will automatically try to write the overage off itself. This is not something that like accounting does, it's just something that Deltec automatically does. And it's easy to miss because it's just down at the bottom and it's very tiny, it's bolded like everything else. It's not highlighted. It's very easy to miss. So it's very important to double check here at the bottom if you're using these billing limits to make sure that you're not missing if there is an adjustment. Again, accounting will try to double check this stuff for you, but you should also be checking this as well if you're using any kind of maximum amount on contracts. So that way we're not losing out on any kind of overage where maybe we can go back to the client and justify some overages. Any questions on any of all that information I just went over?
Jackie, you had some text at the bottom of some of the slides, WIP and pre-billing. Would you mind elaborating on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so WIP stands for work in process. So we also call it WIP. So WIP is anything that's considered unbilled. So they're also the same thing. So WIP is anything unbilled, unbilled time and expenses, but ultimately means unbilled time and expenses, and shortened for WIP.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't answer your second question. Pre-billing. So if you pre-bill, pre-billing means that you bill ahead possibly. So there could be multiple reasons that you pre-bill. It could be that the client has asked you to pre-bill on a project. This could happen a lot with if you work for Avangrid. They will most definitely ask you to bill ahead, especially to close out a purchase order at the end of the calendar year, just so that they can get it under their budget to start the next year fresh. So this happens a lot with our client Avangrid, and just a lot of clients ask us just for odd reasons. So if you ever are asked to pre-bill, that's what we mean by that. So billing ahead, so to make sure that you stay still within your budgets, because you've billed so far ahead. If you're like still $2,000 ahead, but you're spending, $1,000 this month, okay, that's fine. You want to apply that $1,000 to your project and still know that you still have $1,000 left of your project budget to spend, but not going above, like, past that $1,000 still of that budget.
That would apply, Jackie, for deposits too, because a lot of times we do work for unscrupulous actors who don't like to pay. So we require, you know, say it's a $5,000 drilling job, give us 2,500 and then we'll go out into the field for you. So that money gets applied to the job, shows up as a negative, and then you slowly work against it as you has costs and so forth at the job.
Yes, yes, that's another great example. So this is just another great slide on rates. Rates can be based on a multiplier, which I will say that are much easier to use and are much friendlier for project managers because they are just, Deltek just automatically applies whatever that rate is based on that multiplier that you've applied. So if you've selected a labor multiplier of a 2.5, Deltek will automatically, whoever worked on your project, will automatically apply that 2.5 labor multiplier to your project. If you have to use specific rates, which does happen if you are working on an avant-garde, you know, MSA project, where MSA contract rates come into play, or if you're working on projects where term contracts where you have to use these specific rates, or just projects where you've proposed on projects and you have to use these specific rates. Specific rates are great, but they're just a little bit more they could just be a little bit more. Because if you have people that have worked on your project that maybe weren't planning to work on the project, then you have to kind of keep an eye out for that and then apply a rate to those people that maybe weren't planning on working on the project. Or maybe the person that was planning on working the project was absent, so then you had an extra person step in. You have to apply a rate to that person to make sure that Deltek doesn't apply that $0 rate. So that way we have that revenue that's recorded for that employee. So if you, again, so they're no rate assigned the 0 rate. And then it just goes into an example of how the $0 rate really affects the project. I'm not going to go into a specific, like, I'm not going to read this whole slide to you guys because there's a lot of words on there. But it does affect your project because all of the time that gets charged to your project is considered revenue, even if you don't charge the client every single month, we consider that revenue. So everything that is WIP or unbilled in our company is considered revenue. So
Hey,
the
Jackie,
project, yes.
one quick question. So if you have somebody that wasn't originally listed on the PIF as being working on it, but you catch it on your billing, would we then just mark up the billing? Or is that like a separate conversation we need to like reach out to you for?
No, you could still mark it up on the billing. So if you see it on the billing, you would mark it up on the billing and your biller would correct it. And then once it's corrected by your biller, it would be caught in revenue from that point. Again, even if you don't bill it and stuff, it's corrected from that point on. Yeah. Yeah, of course. If you catch it even before that time though, before billing, like when you're in Deltek, looking at reports or looking in project review, and you're like, oh, this person worked on my project, I see they don't have a rate, you can let us know ahead of time too. Again, you would just let your project manager know.
How about when people hit your jobs, they aren't even supposed to be on there, or you get tagged with materials that don't belong on your project?
So you could also let us know at that point too. So for materials, I'm not sure what you mean by materials, but what I think you mean is invoices maybe that hit your project that don't belong. So if you have things that hit your project that don't belong, or time charges that don't belong, you could email your biller or the employee and say, I think this is misapplied to my project. Can you let me know where it goes? Or you can reach out to us and we can do the legwork. I can't speak for all the billers, but I can speak for myself as a biller. I do the legwork for my PMs because I know that you guys are busy. So I do the legwork. And I think a lot of the other billers do the legwork as well. So, but I can't speak for all the satellite offices. Or if you know where it goes to, you can let us know, hey, this needs to be moved to project blah, 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 and we'll get it moved for you. So the project initiation form, that's the long name for PIF, if you ever were curious. I do have another poll question. What is your level of experience with the PIF? So do you have no experience, limited experience, some experience, or you're very experienced? Oh, it's like all over the board. How exciting. It's like all over. Oh goodness. Okay. Well, this will be exciting. Okay. Okay, so this is just some things to know that I'm just going to touch on, and then I have an example PIF that I'm just going to go through with you guys. So the first thing that is listed here is the project number. So one thing to know about the project number is that accounting has automated the assignment of the proposal and the project numbers through Deltek. But if you are using a base number, or you want to use like a next number from a series, then you could just put the base number with like an XXX, and we could pull the next number available for you. If you know the next number, then you could also just put that next number down if you're like really confident. I am worried about like you guys putting the next number down, just because there are so many people now in the system using it. So even if you see a folder and you're like, oh, yep, the next one's this number, there are so many of us working in Deltek now that I am hesitant of you trying to like pick the next number yourself. I would advise you to just put the base number with XXX and let your biller pull the next number for you. If you really want to know what the next number is, you can email your biller and we can give you the next one and we can pull it as a contract pending. So that way you can put it on your PIF and that way you have it and you know what it is if you really want to put the number down. The contract number, so that would be if it is applicable. Usually that comes from the client if it is applicable. Avangrid has a lot of contract numbers, City of Rochester, so a lot of those big clients will have a contract number. So the billing client name and the billing contact. So this would be where the invoice needs to be sent, not necessarily where, not necessarily like your site contact or, who you're contacting, but where necessarily like the invoice needs to be sent. So it might be slightly different. The phases and the fee breakdown, knowing the billing rates versus the labor multiplier. So knowing the difference if you want to use specific billing rates versus the labor multiplier. Again, so if you need to use specific billing rates, or if you wanted to use the labor multiplier. Schedule and backlog, resource staffing, project location. So this is new, project location. So there's the states listed, and then there's also the county. This is important so that way we can file taxes appropriately. So I know it's a hassle to put that information down, but putting that information down is helpful for accounting so that way we can appropriately file our taxes. And project type, sub-consultant and subcontractors. So I'm going to touch a little bit more on this. So their fees and payment terms. So most consultants and subcontractors are almost always on paid when paid terms. And unless approved otherwise by Rob Pepe or Stacy Fries. Paid when paid means that they don't get paid until LaBella gets paid. LaBella doesn't get paid until your client invoice gets paid, and your subconsultant invoice needs to be linked to the client invoice. So just because you approve your consultant invoice does not mean that they're going to get paid. They need to be billed to the client, and then the client needs to pay that invoice to LaBella, and then LaBella pays your client, pays your vendor. If your vendor reaches out about payment, I would forward that to accounts payable for them to have that conversation with them. It's great that you guys have that relationship with your vendors, but I would also push that off to accounting to have us be the bad guys. You guys don't need to be the bad guys. So let us be the bad guys if we need to, or give them that news if it needs to be that news that we haven't received payment from our client. If it's that you guys haven't billed, well, you should bill. If there's a reason that you haven't billed, you could also like give us that information as well, or rope in your biller into the conversation as well. So it's always great, to keep that communication going between, all groups and stuff. Paid when paid terms. LaBella has to get paid before your vendors get paid. And then it's great to know reimbursables. Are they included in the fee, or are they billed in addition to the fee? So that's important too. Okay, so I am going to attempt to switch screens and move to my Excel file. I am not great with technology, so just bear with me for a second. Let's see. Okay, let's see where. Okay, do you see my Deltek screen? Is it this one? Yes, okay, so my Excel file. Can you see the PIF? Yes, okay, cool. All right, so this is just an example of a PIF. This is actually one that was sent in, and I just kind of like tweaked it a little bit. So this is actually a real life PIF that somebody sent in, and I just like changed it a little bit so that way you guys didn't know who it was. This would be where you guys put the billing contact information. So who we're billing, the billing contact. Right here is the project name. So this is what actually goes on the invoices and what actually gets put into Deltek. There is in Deltek, there is like the short name available, and there is like a character limitation. So I would be careful how long you put this here. I don't think that there's a need to put the client name in the project name either. I know sometimes architecture puts the client name for certain reasons, just for like the building conditions survey, because they have so many of them and stuff. For certain circumstances for that, I can see the reasoning, but for most projects, I don't think the client name is necessary. The project manager, the division that you reside in, the market of the project, the project type, and then your fee type. So this is how you want your project billed, your phases. Now the fee type, if you have anything listed here that is phase fixed fee, anything like that, the only time that you have to select the phased fee type is if you have the mixed fee. So if you have mixed fee selected, this is where you would select your phase fee type here. Otherwise, you would just leave those all blank. So if you have the phased fixed fee here, you can leave all of these blank. You don't then have to select phased fixed fee here or lump sum. Like you can leave all of these blank, because then we as your biller know that you want to use the phased fixed fee as the project's overall fee type. These would be the phases, the phase numbers that you want, the phase names that you want. Right here, this is the LaBella only labor. So this is where you would insert your LaBella only labor. Reimbursable expenses would go here by phases, and then any sub-consultants. So this would be outside sub-consultants. I would say like labs are not sub-consultants. Those are considered reimbursable expenses. Outside sub-consultants are considered like I hesitate to call them this, but the LLC, like the LaBella Environmental LLC. So that's like Dave Engert's group. That's like a sub-consultant. Drillers, you know, outside architectures and anybody that's outside, but like lab expenses, those are reimbursable expenses. There is a listing of them on the second tab here, which I'll touch base in a second. If you have a proposal number that's related to this project, you would list it here. If you have any time that you want moved from the proposal number to the project, there's a checkbox, so you would just check it here. If you have only like a certain amount of time that you want moved from the proposal number to the project, you can notate it in the project notes tab. So if you have, you know, only 2 hours from Greg Senical that you want moved from, you know, 1:12, you would notate that in the project notes tab. And then your biller would see that and would only move those hours to the project. So we look at those notes before we just like go ahead and move your proposal time over. If you think that there might be some proposal time that could be moved, ask for a report if you're not sure how to run it. And we can get you a report of the proposal time over to you. So if you're not sure how to get that report, just ask for it and we can send it over to you. If there's an applicable contract number, this is where you would list it. The email address for your billing contact should go over here if you have it. If there is a purchase order number, this is where you would list it here. And then the total fee amount should be listed here. So this is the overall total fee amount. So this should include the labor expenses and sub-consultants. So this should include everything, not just LaBella, the LaBella fee, everything. So it's inclusive of everything. If you have the GPS coordinates, this is where you would list it here. This is not required. It's only if it's available. So you don't have to go ahead and like, you know, Google search this and stuff. It's only if it's readily available. The project location. So this is the state of the project location. The county, if you have it readily available. This is for the project award. If it's a new client, this is just so if we need to know if we need to open a new project folder for you. If you know who your biller is, does everyone know who their current biller is? Yeah. Okay, good. Yay. Yay. Okay, good. And then this is new just because we're moving into you know, more paperless and stuff, how we're invoicing the client. A lot of clients want invoices to be emailed versus mailed and stuff. So if you know that invoices want to be emailed and stuff, this is where you can put the email address here. And then we're doing special tracking for phase 1 ESA projects here on the main page. The second page is for project staff. So if you have specific rates, this is where you would list the employees, the titles from the contract or the proposal, and then the specific billing rates. If you wanted to use a labor multiplier, this is where you could leave these blank. And instead, you could put a targeted multiplier here. So if you wanted to use a targeted multiplier, you would leave this blank. And instead you could put like a 2.5 here. And instead we would use a 2.5 labor multiplier instead of specific rates. So simple as that.
Jackie, We have a comment in the chat from Catherine. She says, I have run into the project name being too long and pertinent information not being included for timesheet entry causes employees to struggle to know if they are hitting the project right. Maybe you want to comment on that, add to it, or maybe just give her a thumbs up. I'm not sure, but
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
I think she was just sharing something she's experienced with the group.
Yeah. Let's see, is it possible?
Yeah. We've got a couple more comments if you have a moment.
So Catherine Thompson, were you speaking to, like, there are a certain number of character limits in Deltek for how many characters you can put in? Because what happens is, this information gets entered here into Excel, but then it gets put into Deltek. So when it comes to the project name, it's got to be very short. It can't have too many characters in it. And I don't remember, Jackie, how many characters that project name has, but you should have, there's typical, I think in Deltek it says, what we should have in that client name. It's like location, what it is, and the client, I think, right, Jackie?
Yeah.
Yeah. That project name is also what is used to set up the project folder. And that also can cause issues with, different CAD programs.
Right.
So definitely, for instance, if it's a school district, instead of spelling out Central School District, say CSD.
Yeah.
All right. Also, Lauren Rodriguez had a question. Is it possible to add a note or character limit for the project name? That way it can avoid the issue. This can also cause problems in some of our softwares. For instance, some imports have a max file path and long project names are usually the issue. So
yeah, so some of it's partially what Sue just said. And basically
right.
On the first page, like if you guys could put a note somewhere to tell people like that limit, then
that there's a character limit here, like right here, like character limit.
Right, or something, just so people are aware. Because I think that's kind of the problem you run into is people don't realize it, and then they do things like spell out Central School District.
Yep.
I
think it's like 56 characters or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, we're just making changes to it. I could always bring it up and see, what everyone's thoughts are. I'm gonna write it down.
Great.
Yeah, I think we'll just take the comments and we'll take them into consideration and we'll let you keep going. I know there are a couple other questions here.
Okay.
Did you want to read them off, Heather? Oh. Just muted.
Yep. Does LaBella not track project location? Chase and Wise, we used to have a KMZ that showed you other projects in the area.
So are you're I think that so I was gonna maybe make a little note about the same way. So the GPS coordinates. So they are currently not mandatory, but the company is looking at creating a database of projects. So the person who's on the call mentioned that at those of us who are at Chazen, we had such a database. All of our projects, we got the GPS data from Google Earth, and then we put it in, got put into Deltek, and it got put into Google Earth, and we had a lovely database so that when we went to go work on got a new project, we could open up the database and see other work that we had done nearby, which was incredibly helpful for a lot of different reasons. So it's currently not mandatory. There is a move afoot to try and identify what the program that we would use for that data compilation. It might be GIS, but we're a little ways away from doing that yet. So it's currently not mandatory. But if anybody on this call is interested in, that for the future, by all means, get the coordinates in there. And then that way your project, if it's in Deltek, those are the projects that will get uploaded into the system. Okay. So hopefully it answers, and I think that answers the follow-up question from Lauren too. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, he said he thought it was mandatory, so no, not at this time.
All right, Jackie, maybe we'll save Jake's question
Yeah.
so you are able to move forward a little bit more.
Okay, all right. Okay, so then moving forward on the second tab is after the project staff is the sub-consultants that are anticipated to work on the project. So something new under the sub-consultants is, so after you list the sub-consultants is the diversity status, excuse me. It's just a clickable drop-down field where you would click the drop-down field and select the diversity status if you know it. And then list the planned amount for that sub-consultant. Most sub-consultants, if you Google them, their diversity status is right on their website. Accounting is also working on looking at all of our sub-consultants' diversity status for all of the vendors that are currently in our system and backtracking. But for any new, it would be appreciated for any new sub-consultants incoming, if you know the diversity status, if you list them, that would be very helpful. This is not something that accounting is rolling out, but a lot of clients are requiring us to report on this information. So if you know the diversity status, that would be very helpful for you to list that for us. And then down below is a list of all the expenses anticipated to work on the project. Here are a listing of typical expenses that are used, and these are reimbursable expenses. So if you're unsure if it's a reimbursable expense or a sub-consultant, you could just use this as an example. And if it's listed here, this means that it's usually a reimbursable expense. So you can see here's lab testing right here. And that means that's a reimbursable expense. And then you would just list the planned amount for each dollar amount. The third tab is for any unit billing. So this would be any unit billing that you have anticipated to work. So you could list the unit name, the estimated quantity, the estimated unit cost. Again, if you're planning on using unit billing, I would have a conversation with your biller or have had that conversation with your biller already if you're planning on using units. The fourth tab is for any project notes or files needed. So any of the project notes would be anything that maybe is not apparent from the first three tabs. So there's a note in here that would be, this one, they want the PO to be listed on the invoice, and they want the invoices to be emailed to this John Smith and to copy in the project manager. So this is just an example of a note that might typically be on a PIF. But other notes that I've seen is client project numbers that they want listed on the invoice, or maybe under project expense notes for accounting, they want receipts to be sent with the invoices. So things like that maybe are not apparent from the first three tabs. Those are very helpful to know before we send the first invoice. It saves a lot of work for you as the project manager. It saves a lot of work for us in accounting as well. So things like that for us to know ahead of time, if you know them ahead of time as well, to just put them on the project right away, right here. Down below, check boxes, how are reimbursable expenses to be billed? So if you know, and if they're included in the fee or if they're billed in addition to the fee, this is where you would just select that box. This is also if you have any percent markups on the consultants or expenses. This is where you would indicate if there is a markup on those consultants or expenses and the percent of the markup here. So that way we could mark those up for you in Deltek appropriately. Any questions on this part so far? Okay. This scary red tab it just looks scary, I promise. It's just for Avangrid files. It's just if you have an Avangrid project, how you want that file structure set up. And we just call it out in red just because it's for Avangrid and we just don't want you to forget on, on the file structure that you want. So that's why it's just highlighted in red. It's not scary. I'm just being dramatic. The next tab is the spread of backlog. So this is just for the LaBella fee. This tab is for the spread of backlog over the 12-month period. It's the distribute of effort for all the groups. It's just supposed to be an estimate. So it's not just the end all be all. It's just supposed to be your best estimate of over the next 12-month period. This is a drop-down menu. So the first month of your project, you would select the first month of the project, and then you would just estimate just the LaBella fee, so just our labor. So we don't want to see any like lab expenses, no travel in here, just labor over the next 12 months. This number should equal this number over here. And then over here should be the fee distribution by each division / discipline that's listed. If you have an incorrect number here, it's going to yell at you and it's going to say that it doesn't match. If it says that it's incorrect, so you'll just want to like double check which one's incorrect. So either the first tab's wrong or this tab's wrong. You'll just want to double check that. This last tab, yep.
Sorry. For our civil group, I don't know how many people are civil, but if you put this information into the spread of backlog, Alani puts it into the civil spread of backlog. So you don't have to, if you put it here, you don't have to do it later when she sends out the monthly emails.
Yeah, and I think every division is different in that respect as to whether or not they pull it from here or they don't, but yeah.
Yeah. So this last tab is how accounting enters in your project budgeting. And this is what pulls for a lot of reports and how the project is entered into Deltek. So this is one of the most important tabs that you can fill out. I will tell you, if you have a multiple phase, multidisciplinary project and you don't fill out this tab, accounting will ask you to fill it out because otherwise we won't be able to complete the project for you. This PIF does a lot of stuff for you. So it autofills the phases at the top here for you. And you would just have to fill in the dollar amounts for the labor for each phase here by discipline division. And for the same thing down here below for the sub-consultants, and then same thing for here down below for the expenses. So that way we can enter in for each phase by division, by discipline, by phase. And so that way the reports can pull for you correctly. And the reporting of where all this stuff flows into is in session 5, which I review in session 5.
Hey, Jackie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question because back when Chazen was integrated, I think that we asked the question, or we were, because this was new to us, and we had something similar, but it was a little bit different at Chazen. So if you scroll back up, if you do not fill in the information on this tab, I think what we were told back then is that the budgets don't then get set up in the different divisions. It just is that correct?
So if I can't speak to the Poughkeepsie office and how that accounting office works, but I can tell you that the Rochester office will push back on you and ask for this information.
Right, but I think that's why I think it, without that information, the budget can't be basically allocated out to the divisions. So yeah.
Right, correct. Yeah. So if this information is not filled out, if we ask for it, if we don't get it back, then you're right. Yeah, the budgets just aren't filled out for the project. Right.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Catherine, your question, can we require employees to enter comments for time? Yes. If you need comments to be entered for time, that's something that you could just put in the project notes. That would be here. You could just put it here. You can request that comments be required on this project. And that's something where the employee won't even be able to submit their timesheet unless they enter a comment for the project, for your particular project where it's required.
Which is very helpful, I've found as a PM. If I don't have comments and I'm reviewing invoices and I don't know what somebody's done, it takes me a whole lot longer to get through the invoice to figure out what's, where we are status wise and whatnot. So.
Right. Okay, so let me try to switch back to the PowerPoint again, which I'm sure is going to just go super smooth. Let's see here. Oh, it happened really fast. Okay, all right, yay. Okay, so the PIF, a document, which, okay, so when sending in the PIF, you should send it to the PIF distribution email. You should be CCing in your biller. And also sending in with any other relevant documents. So that's the proposal, any signed agreement, if you have a purchase order, a term agreement, any professional service agreement, and any other client invoicing requirements that you have received. There is an updated PIF template. It's always on the intranet. It's right under the operations and then forms, which I did have, but I really don't want to switch back to like another form. So I'm just going to keep powering through here, guys. Once you have sent it in, then an automated email gets sent from Deltec. It gets sent to the project manager and your biller, and then the project setup team, which then initiates your project folder setup. So accounting, contrary to popular belief, does not set up your project folder. We only do the Deltec portion. So if you have a problem with your project folder, you can always start with us, but we will forward you on to someone else that can help you with your project folder. So this is all just everything I just went over with the project, the PIF that I just went over, and just like screenshots of everything. So I'm literally just going to just slide right past all these. This is a simple PIF checklist that we have generated for you. So everything that we just went through, this is just a really nice checklist of everything that's just helpful for you guys to use. So invoices and batch billing, what to know. So when you get your first batch billing, it's really important to review all the staff that have worked on it, making sure that everyone has billing rates and that the people that have charged to your projects belong on your projects, belong to the phases that they have charged to, have the correct rates on your project, and sorry, I just lost my train of thought. And that the charges are correct and accurate. If the draft invoice that you get does not look the way you want it to look, it's important to have that conversation with your biller as well. Especially have it early on. So if you get your first batch billing with the project that you've just set up and you're like, oh, this is not what I want it to look like, make sure you just have that conversation with your biller so that we get it the way you want it to look. And we can go through a couple of revisions, however many times you want it to look before it goes to the client. It's like I mentioned, your biller is going to be one of your best friends. So, communication. If you require any progress reports or any required backup that goes with your invoices, make sure that you send all that information along with your billing reports as well. Make sure that you review any kind of contracts or subcontracts. You review the fee, again, your schedules, your staffing, all the things that Sue talked about and stuff. And then just make sure that you clearly communicate with your biller the things that need to be billed. If you do not want to bill this month, if you're holding the charges, if you are holding, make sure that you're communicating why you're holding. So if you're holding because you're working on a change order, or if you're holding because of an issue, make sure you're telling us that reason why as well. So all of those things to communicate with us as well. Make sure that you're telling us those things as well. It's also really great too if you have an ongoing project and you're holding charges, and then we have this huge list of invoices that we've sent to the client and they're not paying us, and you know why they're not paying us. It's great to also let us know why they're not paying us as well, so then we can forward that information over to our accounts receivable team as well. So if you have that information, the more information you give us, the better it'll be in the end for everyone as well. And if you have any questions regarding the invoicing process, please just contact your biller at any point in time. I do have one last question, one last poll question. Have you had a meeting with your biller or accounting to set up your Deltec dashboard? So yes, you will be reaching out. Yes, but not sure when. Yes, accounting has reached out to me, but no, you've reached out to, or no, but you're planning on reaching out. This is really exciting. This means accounting's being really proactive. A lot of yeses that accounting has reached out. This is super exciting. Okay, great. For anyone that has not reached out or not had the meeting yet to set up your Deltec dashboard, please feel free to reach out to your biller directly, or if you're not sure who your biller is, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can get you in touch with who your biller is, so that way we can get the process started. And I think that's it for my stuff. Right. I think that's it.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah.
Any more questions for Jackie?
Well, we didn't address Jake's, but I'm not sure if
that's right.
Jake is here and maybe we could quickly, I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, Jake.
Yeah, no, I know with phasing, there's, a million and one ways to do it, but, with being in billing, I'm sure you've seen it all the different ways. And is there a way that's more convenient for you and more convenient for us when we are doing billing to have phases set up? I would think that if we know a project is going to be phased and it's projects that are all going to be worked on at the same time, if we set one project number up with separate phases or tasks that for each phase and break it up that way, that's probably easiest. And I'm sure it gets more complicated than that, but do you have any other feedback on that?
They have like a team.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I think I would need more background exactly, like how your project's structured and like how are you saying like is it like milestone billing? Like once you reach a milestone, then you can bill?
No, again, there's so many different ways they can do it. So I don't want to get into one project specifically.
Okay, maybe it's a conversation, yeah, that we can have outside of this then.
Yeah, and Catherine's been helpful for me, and between her and Andrew, I just like I said, I figured you'd seen it all different ways. Maybe there's a best practice for phasing. So, okay.
Okay, yeah,
We'll help you figure it out, Jake, I promise.
yeah.
All right, well, I know Jackie, you have to head out. We probably all have to head out, so thank you very much. And hopefully you found this useful, and we will see you for our next session.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.